from Wall Kimmerer's Braiding Sweetgrass. Know the ways of the ones who take care of you, so that you may take care of them. Introduce yourself. Be accountable as the one who comes asking for life. Ask permission before taking. Abide by the answer. Never take the first, never take the last. Take only what you need. Take only that which is given. Never take more than half. Leave some for others. Harvest in a way that minimizes harm. Use it respectfully. Never waste what you have taken. Share. Give thanks for what you have been given. Give a gift and reciprocity for what you have taken. Sustain the ones who sustain you, and the earth will last forever. In my early 20s, I disappointed my father, not for the first time and not for the last time, by changing my undergraduate major to philosophy. I tried on a lot of different hats from the ages of like 18 to 23-ish. Was in the Army. I went to community college for music, fell in love with musical theater, changed my major to theater, fell in love with existential philosophy through theater, and then found myself in philosophy. And my father was convinced that, oh, you're just going to wind up teaching or a lawyer. Oh, joke's on you, Dad. Oh, but you know, the thing about a philosophy 101 course, it's being like keel-hauled through all these ideas, and personally, I loved it. But in retrospect, I'm thinking, you know, you start with Plato, of course, and you work your way through and dot, 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 dot. It's a lot of dualisms. It's a lot of dualisms, cutting the world in two in some ways, right? Perhaps this is nowhere more exemplified than when you get to René Descartes, a 17th century French scientist and philosopher who had quite a few ideas that have had an outsized impact on our world. Subtle, perhaps, but I reckon we all live under the shadow of Cartesian dualism in one way or the other. Descartes broke the world up like this. He said there are two kinds of things, res cogitans and res extensa. Now, res cogitans, that is your thinking thing. That is your human, hopefully all humans, but as we'll see, that has not always been the case. And res extensa, well, that's the body. That's the meat and the rocks and the trees and the water and everything else that isn't a thinking thing is a res extensa. Descartes was convinced of very little, actually. Descartes felt that doubt is the origin of wisdom. He came to this conclusion by trying to figure out, well, what is truly undoubtable? And so he sits in an armchair and tries to doubt everything he possibly can and winds up with this conclusion that cogito ergo sum, perhaps you've heard of this, I think, therefore I am. One's thinking capacities defining one's agency in the world, one's actual being, sort of an ontology of mind. How do we know we are real? Well, you think. But what does that say about others? Right? So Descartes, is it ever really sure? If any of this other stuff is real, if you are real, if I am real, if anyone else is real, we could just be brains in a vat tricked by a demon. You know how it goes. The Matrix, right? The Matrix. Now, of course, we can appreciate doubt here. I don't think Descartes so much appreciated doubt so much as was trying to flee from it until he backed himself into a corner. But for Descartes, it is the origin of wisdom. And indeed, doubt runs the field for the scientific method. We, in Western and empirical science, we try to operate from a reductive fashion to really get the nuts and bolts of what's going on. And that's one way of knowing the world, right? Doubt can be the origin of a kind of wisdom. But too often, in this bifurcation of reality, we have lost quite a bit along the way. Where in such a doubt is there room for a relationship, especially if from the armchair you're thinking, oh, other people might not be real? This has had an impact, friends. I know people in the avocado toast generation with me might have seen memes on the internet about NPCs. For those who don't know, that's video game talk for non-player character. Player character has agency in the world, and the other things inhabiting that virtual space are like window dressing, set dressing for whatever you're doing. To relate that idea to other people, well, that's a wicked idea if there ever was one, friends. Sad, and maybe not so powerful yet, but don't discount these dualisms. For a man who advocated that the seeker after wisdom ought to conquer themselves rather than the world, this idea has been used to justify colonialism, subjugation, conquest, the pillaging of more than just the human world, although certainly that. Christian dominionism, being here, the manifest destiny, slavery, war. Unrelated, but yeah. Of course, these dichotomies are a fabrication, right? They're a model, and like all models, they're flawed. Sometimes this is useful, but we can become way too addicted to easy answers, right? Gosh, the way we think about politics these days, about the challenging questions of our time, it's like there's only two sides. We ought to know better. I believe folks here do generally know better, that splitting the world in two like this is often dangerous, because of course, trees, animals, perhaps more, other people certainly, are not res extensa, sheer body, yet that is how, well, frankly, Western metaphysics has frequently been wielded as a weapon to do just that, to reduce indigenous folks, people of color, down to just pure body. Dangerous, dangerous, looming over us like a cloud, cutting the sky in two, cutting our hearts in two, cutting us apart from the more than human world. And so on this Indigenous Peoples Month, on our last Sunday of it, I really feel like we need to lift up the work of that Potawatomi botanist, Wall Kimmerer. Some of you all might be familiar with her book, Braiding Sweetgrass. Fantastic. We read it in seminary. It is close to my heart. To put it plain, white supremacy does lurk at the heart of Western metaphysics. This isn't to say that Descartes, Kant, those folks aren't necessarily white supremacists. They are writing before that term is really in vogue, and yet nonetheless, these ideas have informed so much evil in this world. How much blood has been spilt on the altar of dualisms? And so I believe that we might chart another way, heeding the words of others, elders, people who know something perhaps we might not. Now, Kimmerer says many things in Braiding Sweetgrass and her earlier work, Gathering Moss. When I was at seminary in Meadville, Lombard, we explored this text as a kind of treatment on eco-theology. Now, theology is often thought of this highbrowed thing in a tower that trickles down and tells us how or who or what God might be. There's lots of ways to do theology. Eco-theology is a constructive theology. It is something new, or at least a reconceptualization of something old, that brings to light the environmental concerns of our time, of which there are many. I don't got to tell y'all. We know. But an eco-theology or an environmental spirituality calls us to have a closer relationship with the land itself, to recognize the interwovenness of the world. Even buried under snow, stuff is happening, y'all. Stuff is happening. We know that trees aren't dead when they lose their leaves. They communicate. They feel. They talk to one another. And trees speak, connected by mycelia. In fact, where'd my prop go? Here it is. This here, a great example of reciprocity in relationship. Y'all, this is a little piece of wood. You can't see it from here. It's a little piece of wood with lichen on it. Now, lichen, I'll pass it around to folks, yeah. Lichen is an old being on the land. The interwoven lives of algae and fungi, old as old, perhaps one of the oldest things, turning stone into soil. We would not be here without it. Now, different lichen acts different ways, but fundamentally it is emblematic of that spirit of reciprocity, of sharing, where they take care of one another. And over the eons, these algae, these fungi, have become one organism. And so it is. Life is messy and strange. Sometimes the many become one, the one become many. Ooh, my tablet closed. And recognizing such relationships can allow us to adopt a different kind of way of relating to the world. Frequently up here, when I'm talking about nature, I might say something like the more than human world or the other than human world. This is a way to get around speaking about nature as an it, as an object, while I remain a subject. This is not the case. I believe if we open up our hearts to the possibility, this world can be full of subjects in our place and what makes us special, maybe no less diminished. For the world is full of gifts, the gifts of soil, where lichen breaks stone into soil, the gifts of breathable air and water, sunlight, y'all. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. And so what is to be done? And how might we experiment with the living out of such a theology, of an eco-theology? Well, Kimmerer asks us some questions. What happens when you plant a tree? What happens when you wield a shovel in one hand, a human artifact, and a tree, a provisional mystery, in the other? What happens when you dig a hole, a Kali-like destruction, and plant a tree within it, an act of creativity? What happens when you learn about your local ecology, not just as an observer, but also as a participant? What happens when you embrace the wildness of a tree being and integrate it into the semi-wild streets and streams of your local community? What happens when you crack open your isolated sense of self and plant within your heart this symbol, or ever-branching interbeing? What happens when you consider your actions in terms of your ecological and cultural legacy? What would it be like to live with that heightened sensitivity to the lives given for ours? To consider the tree and the Kleenex, the algae and the toothpaste, the oak and the floors, the grape and the wine, to follow back that thread of life in everything and pay it respect. Once you start, it's hard to stop, and you begin to feel yourself awash in a pattern of gifts. What is the source of this pattern? Why is the world so beautiful? It could just as easily be otherwise. Flowers could be ugly. They could. Some flowers smell really bad. This is true. But most flowers, but they do still find their own purpose, and they remain beautiful for us. This indigenous worldview, according to Kimmerer, humans are viewed as somewhat lesser beings. In the democracy of species, we are referred to as the younger siblings of creation. So like younger siblings, we must learn from our elders. Human beings have been here on this planet around 300,000 years. That's a long time, no doubt. Land plants have been around for around 7 million years. That's an order of magnitude longer. And so when we consider the life of the lichen, when we consider the way trees communicate with one another through mycelia, in fact, our religious naturalist group planted a tree not very long ago, and while we were doing so, we were considering how the red oak we planted may one day be communicating with the larger red oak over here, and how that red oak may provide nutrients through a mycelial network to keep the little tree alive, to help it through its times of growth, times of challenge. What does that remind me of? It reminds me of like a beloved community, right? Like something we're trying to build here, a place where everyone can be welcome, where people help people, where love circles around and comes back to you. Because that's what reciprocity is. It's sharing. It's pushing through the fabrications of scarcity that rain down on us like you have a have and you have a have-not. Some of us are in power, some of us are in pain, and in the midst we meet. In a place like this we could even meet, and we could share. We could learn from one another. We could ask for help when we need it. I'll say it and I'll say it again, and I'm saying it to myself too because it's hard. But indeed, through such trust, through such a recognition of abundance in the world, friends, we may find ourselves in a place of gratitude. Gratitude for the gifts of the more than human world, gratitude for the love we experience in our relationships. But what can gratitude bring out of us but that spirit of generosity? All the way down, a gift that can be given. And so I'll wrap it up here by reprising Kimmerer's piece, urging us to know the ways of the ones who take care of you, so that you may take care of them, introducing yourself, being accountable as the one who comes asking for life. And do we not all ask for life, friends? Ask permission before taking. Abide by the answer. Never take the first, never take the last. Take only what you need. Take only that which is given. Never take more than half and leave some for others. Harvest in a way that minimizes harm. Use it respectfully. Never waste what you have. Never waste what you have taken. Share. Give thanks for what you have been given. Give a gift in reciprocity for what you have taken. Sustain the ones who sustain you, and the earth and love will last forever. Amen. Blessed be.